We'll move on to other news, moving to the tensions over technology between China and the U.S. Biden has reversed a Trump administration attempt to ban two popular Chinese-owned apps, TikTok and WeChat. And the apps were never actually blocked in the U.S. due to legal challenges. But efforts to keep them off American gadgets exacerbated tensions between the two countries. CGTN's Roy Rattenberg has more.
TikTok has nearly 700 million monthly average users worldwide. The company says more than 100 million of them are here in the United States. The short video sharing app, known for its viral challenges, is very popular with young smartphone users. Last September, and again in December, federal judges blocked a Trump administration effort to ban its download in the U.S., a challenge that's remained stuck in the courts. Then President Donald Trump had been trying to arm-twist TikTok's Chinese owner ByteDance to sell its American operations to American firms, claiming its data harvesting posed a national security threat. So too, he argued, did WeChat, a messaging, networking, and e-commerce super app that's wildly popular in China and among the Chinese diaspora. On Wednesday, President Joe Biden revoked 3 of Trump's executive orders that targeted the apps, instead issuing his own order seeking to identify apps that could pose, quote, an unacceptable risk to U.S. national security and to the American people, and ordering federal agencies to develop new guidelines to protect the public's personal information. Trump's attempted ban was seen as part of a larger effort to confront China. Beijing denounced those moves and others. Biden's approach is seen as more down the middle. It creates windows for a review process and a timeline for new criteria, but keeps in place a possible sanctions mechanism and the demand for TikTok's divestiture. The announcement comes just one day after the U.S. Senate passed a bipartisan bill authorizing some $200 billion in funding for science, technology, and research to better compete with Chinese advances. Beijing reacted, saying the U.S. should not treat China as a, quote, imaginary enemy. The bill still needs to pass the lower U.S. House and then get signed by President Biden. Both are likely, though it's unclear what the bill will look like by then. Roy Rattenberg, CGTN in Washington.
Now for more on this, Andy Mock is joining us from Beijing. He's a senior research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. Andy, welcome to Global Watch. Well, the U.S. president has overturned 3 executive orders on the apps, but he's also ordered a review to look into security concerns. How should we read his policy of lifting and putting more bans on Chinese apps?
Thanks for having me on. Well, I think we are still in a period of significant uncertainty in terms of the direction of U.S. policy towards China. Certainly, the Biden administration, their team are not ideologues or demagogues. So I think this is certainly a positive. Now, the global China watching community, especially those that are more sympathetic to China, and we could say perhaps more objective, on the one hand, worry that the Biden administration might be even more confrontational towards China in an effective way. But I think, on the other hand, my own view is that the Biden team and President Biden himself is not a revolutionary, but really an institutionalist, and as a result, is very pragmatic and realistic. So the hope, or my hope, is that they will take a much more balanced and rational view, recognizing that how important China is, whether we're looking at providing inexpensive, high-quality consumer goods that really provide the bedrock of a comfortable life for millions of Americans, to students from overseas, Chinese students studying in the U.S., et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that there will be a recognition of that, and not just a focus on what they see as the negatives.
Well, it seems that we're not seeing quite balanced policies from Biden, though. For instance, the U.S. Senate has passed a sweeping bill to challenge Chinese tech in the real serious terms. How will this affect plans by Chinese internet companies to expand their business overseas?
Absolutely, Dominique. So on the one hand, there's a lot of talk, a lot of chatter that this is really the one issue that has bipartisan support. And I think politically, from a domestic political perspective, it's a no-lose position to take in the U.S. to be anti-China. But we have to look at the details and, of course, consider that words do have consequences. And if the U.S. does take an overly negative and confrontational tone towards China, it not only has domestic effect, but also global repercussions as well, and not just with China, but the rest of the world. So I think the U.S. has to balance these considerations. This bill, of course, is meant to counter and compete with China. Now, the Biden administration's so-called 4 Cs, contain, confront, compete, and where possible, cooperate with China. I think the first point is contain really doesn't make a lot of sense today. So the U.S., of course, is the 800-pound gorilla on the global stage. But even an 800-pound gorilla can't contain a 2-ton elephant. That is the Chinese economy and I think Chinese society overall. But competition done in a healthy, fair way can be a win for everybody. So my own view is that if the U.S. says, look, we see China as a rival, we want to compete, but there's agreed rules and principles of fair competition, that might not be a bad thing, but hopefully the confrontation and the containment aspect of these 2 Cs, again, will, in the light of reality and the institutionalist, more pragmatic approach of the Biden administration, that these will be muted, hopefully.
Right. You said the Biden administration is pragmatic and institutional, and that we need to observe maybe, but China is pragmatic enough, and China welcomes fair and fair competition indeed. Well, the good news is that the lines of communications have opened, and we reported earlier in the news bulletin that Chinese and U.S. commerce officials spoke over the phone, agreeing to improve trade and investment ties. How do you see the direction of bilateral dialogue, especially at this point?
So I think dialogue, of course, is always a positive. And I think that this discussion or this set of discussions illustrates this point that, first of all, that the U.S. is in some very key ways quite dependent on China. Economically, not just, again, as the provision of inexpensive, high-quality consumer goods, from televisions to washing machines to clothing to toys, but as a source of foreign students that really are the foundation of many college towns in the United States. So it's not just the university benefits, but the local economy. Look at the contributions of STEM graduate students that come predominantly from China and India. So I think the U.S., in fact, does rely a lot on China. And the Biden administration, I believe, genuinely has the interest of the American people at heart and are realist and pragmatist. So given that, I think the incentives for working with China are quite large, and that look at the pandemic as well. So imports from China to the United States surged. I think this is a great data point for all involved to consider that, in fact, there's much more to be gained from a cooperative, healthily competitive relationship instead of a destructively confrontational stance that we've seen in the Trump administration. And again, I think we're in a very crucial period for the Biden administration. On the one hand, that's a positive. They are taking their time. They're not being impetuous or rash, despite the negative political climate in the United States towards China. But we won't know for sure until this comprehensive strategy is released.
Right. We hope the dialogue can improve bilateral, at least trade ties between the two countries indeed. Competition is welcomed, but not confrontation. Right, thank you very much, Andy Mork, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalizing.